Welcome to the talk show Life Stories with Marc Hoberman. The goal of this show is to provide a learning experience to people of all ages, with guests from various fields in academics, a wide range of industries, and insight into the many forms of art, athletics, and entertainment. We hope you enjoy the show. Musician Frank Greenfield is our guest today. Frank will speak about his experiences in the music industry, as well as the adversities he had to overcome to achieve success.
Frank Greenfield, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mark. It's great to meet you. See you.
So good to have you. What a pleasure. You know, Frank, you've accomplished so much in the music industry, but it begs the question, where did it all begin?
It all began, and I was just at a high school reunion, and people came up to me and said, "Well, I remember you when you were in fifth grade, and you were playing guitar for the whole school." And that's where it started. Not necessarily in the fifth grade, but I've always been into music. If you were a friend of mine, we would be doing music together at some point. So that's kind of how it started.
So when you say music, was it a musical instrument? Was it you doing air guitar?
Well, that's pretty funny. Yeah, actually, yes, in the beginning, or air drums. So drums were my first instrument. But I remember listening to my parents, records, and there was anything from Herb Alpert to Tijuana Brass to Earth, Wind and Fire, and just Django Reinhardt and all those things. And it was something, Beach Boys, is something about the emotional quality of the music that really took me to a different place. And I really love that. So that's kind of how it started. It was something I always, really pursued.
I love when I hear certain answers to questions because it brings me back to my childhood. So when I was young, my parents were the same thing with the music. But the first instrumental album was Herb Alpert. And I think maybe it was called his fifth or his ninth, I think it was called. And it had La Banda. I remember some song like that and things of that nature. And that brings me back also. So, people really do have music in their background and their parents listen to music, but very few or not a lot make the jump to musician. Yeah. And even fewer make the jump to successful, self-sustaining, full-time musician, which you've done for decades. So, most people are unaware of the many adversities you faced along the way to Hollywood. So so what's the story behind the glory?
Oh, wow. I like that, the story behind the glory. I had, all my life pursued music. I went to music college at night, worked during the day. I was one of those guys in my lunch hour, my regular job, whatever that was, practicing my guitar. I studied classical and jazz. And so I was always practicing lunch hour. You'd see a guitar neck sticking out of the window of the car with the heat on. And so that was, my grind. I was raised, in New Jersey, Philadelphia. There was not much of a music scene going on out there, even though people said, oh, the Philadelphia music scene. But when I was there was not much really happening. I took it pretty much as far as I could go, but I was always working on my craft. Always. I was trying to work in the studio and do library style music and trying to play with bands. And it got to a point in my life where I realized, I had to pursue the dream. It was going to be a do or die, attitude. And on a side note, I was, I've been doing martial arts for 26 years now and using martial arts kind of philosophies in music. When I came out here, I was a little bit older. I knew one person and I said, I have to do it. So I drove out, and that's kind of where it started. In summary, it wasn't what I had anticipated. I thought, there was an artistic community out here. There's, I'll be well received, not like I was in Philadelphia when people look at you, like you're some kind of a freak show or you can't make that happen out here. And, I also, like I might have mentioned, I came out here with a severe hearing disability. I'm hearing disabled. I have single-sided deafness, which makes my ability to communicate with people a little off. I also came out with some afflictions, drug-related things I needed to to kick before I compared to where I am now. So I really had to stay on the grind and work through those adversities. And I like I shared with you before, adversity builds strength. It can either destroy you or build you and build your character. And I really did feel I am born destined to do this. I have to do this or I will die trying. So in summary, that's kind of what I did.
Well,
I,
when some people hear I had to kick the habit or I had to kick the drug addiction stuff, I think when they hear it, they're a little flippant and they're like, oh, cold turkey and that kind of thing. Would you be able to walk us through some of the things you had to go through in order to come out on the other side of things, on the better side into the light?
Yeah, I love to share that story now. I have almost 7 years sober. So I had my
Congratulations,
younger.
by the way.
Oh, thank you. I had, as a younger man, a lot of health issues with stomach, physical afflictions, and early on, I had developed a dependence on pain pills, and I was getting them because I had some kind of an affliction, but I learned to take them when I was in pain or when life was good, when life was bad, when I was hurting emotionally. I just took them to survive. And the very first time I tried to get off them was when I was out here. And the first time I was able to do it after about a 2 or 3 week withdrawal period. The second time at 6 months, just really dealing with if you're familiar with opiates, Vicodin, morphine to be specific, it's just I had gotten so dependent on them and your brain chemistry changes, and there's a lot of things that made me turn to soothing, turn to numbing out. Most of my life, I was emotionally distant. I was numbed out, and that's how I was in survival mode. And
were you in a band at that time? I mean, you're always doing music, but were you in an actual band?
Always doing music. I like to say that I was a functioning drug addict. And even my sponsor says, well, that means that you can maybe collect a paycheck, but your life is a mess. And my life was a mess. Right. All the things that go along with that. But the wonderful thing about the story is, I had to go to rehab. I had this thing called PAWS. It's post-acute withdrawal syndrome. And it took me about 18 months to start to withdraw. My primary care doctors told me when I told them I wasn't going to stop, he said, Frank, I'm going to be honest, it could be 3 to 5 years before you start thinking. But at that time, Mark, you get to a point when it's either I'm going to die or I'm going to live. And if I live, this might be the best that it gets. But, I really, wanted to live. I had some pretty good success as a writer, as a record producer. I didn't have my band, the Family of Funk, together yet, but I was playing in bands with some artists. And, but I remember, being in a studio and, chopping stuff up and not caring who saw. I did, but that was my life. I didn't lose everything. I just lost, what in AA they call it incomprehensible demoralization. My life was just an absolute mess. I was not healthy. I always would pride myself in being, athletic, being a martial artist, a black belt. But I was just a mess. I ended up going into rehab. An organization called Music Cares assisted me. And I remember the day that I'm like, I just can't do it anymore. So I got rid of everything that I had, and I had a lot, to say me. But at that point, it doesn't matter how much you have. It's all bad. It doesn't get any better. You're in a constant state of of withdrawal, and you can't get enough. I mean, it's very stressful. So the beautiful part about the story is I think that at about 5 years, I did start to think a little bit differently, and I started to really address the things that made me use that like that. And that's really where the hard work is right there. There's also a period where, when you're using opiates, that you're, as a guy, your testosterone levels are jacked up. So I went through this really like overweight phase and a totally ugly phase. My body was kind of coming back to normal, and it was hard. Plus, you couldn't trust anything that was going on in your mind, and you were dealing with the fallout of some of the consequences of how you lived your life, and regret, guilt, family, those kind of things. So my caseworker that I still stay in touch with, she said, Frankie, usually between years 5 to 10, a lot of things open up, and they do. And there is healing, and that's really where the work is. I love I don't want to be preaching AA or preaching anything, but there is some really substantial things in those programs, and it talks about, trudging the road of happy destiny. It's a term in the big book. Trudging, we think of like a long, arduous procedure, but trudging actually means to walk with purpose. And in anything in life, anything worthwhile is difficult. I'm going to talk about martial arts. I trained for 6 years to become a black belt in one style, and then I started to train in another style. Everything is hard. The music business is very hard. Navigating your way, finding out how the business works, finding your own lane is extremely difficult. You're getting beat down. You're always hearing no. It's not the kind of business that you go and get a degree and you can go out and get a job in. So yeah, it's anything worthwhile is not easy. Yeah. Same thing with sobriety. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, it all ties together. And
yeah.
You mentioned that you did go, because you say you really can't get a degree, but you did have some kind of musical training at some point.
I did.
And
I went to Westminster Conservatory of Music. I started with one of the premier classical guitarists and lutists in the world, Dr. Robert Trent. And when I was training, I wanted to just learn the idiom. I realized the great monster guitar players at the time were studying classical and jazz and theory and knowing how to read music. And I'm a formal training kind of a guy. It's good to have ear. Mm-hmm. I realized I had a natural, two natural things, good natural rhythm and melody. And then even being deaf, I hear things a little bit different. So there's an emotional quality. Like I realized my lane in music, that's what I can bring to the table. I don't know how to engineer, but I know, certain things about music theory, what sounds good, what is musical, and, what is not. And so I still am always, practicing every day. I'm back in this thing called The Real Book. It's jazz standards, playing bebop. It's challenging, but I'm always trying to take my craft to the next level. Mm-hmm.
That's great. And so people have to realize that there is flash, as you said, but there is the story behind the glory. But you mentioned many times, I think you've had help besides natural talent, besides going to school for it, which is tremendous. You've mentioned martial arts several times, and most people, or many people, just think martial arts is what they see on TV and in the movies. So how did the martial arts join forces with Frank Greenfield to help shape your destiny professionally?
Yeah, I attribute a lot of martial arts philosophies to music. It's just that do or die attitude. It's just my long time, what we call Sabanim in the Korean style martial arts. In Wan Kim became also not just a teacher, but a very good friend and mentor. And I'm not into fighting. I'm not into, UFC, even though I respect those guys athletically. I did it for here. I needed discipline in my mind. And that's, discipline will push you to do things that you wouldn't normally do. I became an instructor, and so an instructor normally, not that I'm that great or my skills are that great, but your form and your technique has to look good. It could always be, there's a philosophy like, if you want to see the master, look at the student. I had a great grandmaster, and so when you're demonstrating something for someone, your skills need to look good, they need to look precise, and that takes discipline. I still train 3 to 4 times a week by myself, because I don't have time outside of my career and some other things just with life. But I do things to keep my own skills up. And a lot of times I don't feel like it. The place where I train is not very inspiring. It's a heavy bag and some weights and a dirty little room. But I do it because it's I work in a youth-oriented business. So I want to stay healthy. I need to stay fit and stay, young looking and keep my craft up, because if you don't, there's someone else that is right there that will take it. Maybe not take your position, but there's discipline is whether it's your craft, knowing, okay, when I'm in this situation, I know how to push through. Right at 5 years sober, I got a chance to audition for a world-class funk band, and I didn't know the songs. My contact said, look, when you come in, just try to learn these songs, listen to the Spotify or whatever. So Ronnie Wilson, who was running the Gap band, and he said, okay, Frank, when I point to you, we're going to do this song. When I point to you, you solo. And that was my audition. Wow. The whole band had already been in there rehearsing for a few days. So I'm like, to the keyboard player, okay, what key are we in? So when he pointed to me, and that was it, he said, okay, you're in. But it was my discipline and knowing certain things about theory, all my musical training, kind of coming together at that one point, if that makes any sense, and this kind of ties in with martial arts. When you do something so much, like 10,000 times, it gets in your muscle memory. Right. Most people will not push themselves to that level.
Well, it's interesting because you mentioned certain addiction. I've done work in schools and I do presentations, and the landscape has changed, because back in the day, it used to be when he hits rock bottom, but now rock bottom could be dead.
That's right.
With the fentanyl coming onto the scene and things of that nature. And I have to say, I appreciate so much you sharing this, because you and I have spoken, and that, I was diagnosed with epilepsy at the age of 16 and didn't write my memoir to tell people about it till I was 54. And if you're out there watching, I know the weight lifted off my shoulders when I talked to it. I went from don't tell anybody to tell anybody who will listen. So when you say you're less reluctant now to discuss it, you're really not just changing lives, you have the ability to save lives. And I just think that by you entertaining and educating people, it's a perfect quinella, as we say in gambling terms. So it's really great stuff. So what is on the Frank Greenfield horizon?
So 2 years ago, we broke our funk band, a family of funk, right at the beginning of COVID, when people were kind of isolating and living in fear. I gave an interview once before, like many of us in the industry, like we don't have time for that. We're moving on to the next thing. I spent the previous 15, 16 years as a producer and a sideman, and got into music publishing and have a lot of hundreds of titles in film and TV. But now was the time for the band, and we started writing songs with I'm sorry, my cat wants to be on camera, so I'm trying to shoot him.
My dog.
So we started the band a couple of years ago. I've got some great people in the group, some great writers, some people I'm honored to call friends. And we put, the band together, wrote some great songs based on each one of our characters, which happens to be, it's crazy when things kind of line up in life and you can see you're going in the right direction. And then we were scouted last year. We played every place, around in LA. And then we were scouted last year by a bigger producer, a manager that started also to bring us resources, publicity team. Earlier in the year, we recorded a single with this producer. Then we shot a video early in the morning, which is now won 6 awards. I mean, it's crazy as things line up. So we're preparing to go out on tour in March with the bands, and playing casinos, cruises. We've got a whole merchandising plan for our group, and it's really incredible. Yeah.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Frank Greenfield, thank you so much for being here today, sharing your experiences in entertainment. More importantly for me, sharing the obstacles you had to overcome to achieve success. That's where the gold is. So thank you for that. And
you're welcome.
Thank you. And to the viewers, don't forget to watch us on E360 TV, available on Roku, Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Follow us on social media. Life Stories is on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and of course, our YouTube channel. We're 9 p.m. Wednesday nights, EST, on E360. So we are also featured on U2 America. Frank Greenfield, thank you so much. You've been a great guest.
Thank you, Mark. Awesome.
Thank you for watching Life Stories with Marc Hoberman. To contact Marc, email him at info@lifestorieswithmarchoberman.com or visit him on social media through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. Thank you for watching Life Stories with Marc Hoberman.